Is the Jeep Wrangler reliable? We're going to go over that. We're also going to go over common problems with the Wrangler in today's video. I'll include a link to the Jeep Insanity's website in the description down below. They're providing us with the Wrangler. I'll also include a link to my car buying guide. Let's get into it. There are 4 different powertrain options currently available with the Wrangler. We're going to start off with the 2.0 turbo. It is a turbocharged 4-cylinder, 2 liters in displacement. This powertrain is by no means perfect, but there are many examples with over 100,000 miles with this powertrain, and so if you maintain it properly, you can get pretty good mileage out of it, at least 100K and potentially even 200,000 miles. Now the next one is the Pentastar V6, which everyone calls tried and true. It's a naturally aspirated 3.6 liter V6, and that is actually what this particular Wrangler has, is the 3.6 liter V6, which might not be as reliable as the 2.0 turbo over the long term. There can be head gasket issues, oil leaks, just general engine failure, which is pretty sad. And so understand that the 3.6 V6 can get you to higher mileage, but it actually might struggle more than the 2.0 turbo, might be a little bit more expensive when it comes to maintenancing compared to the 2.0 turbo, which is really sad to hear. But both the 3.6 and the 2.0 turbo are dead reliable when you compare them to the 4xe. If you see a 4xe badge, if you see blue recovery points, that means it is time to head for the hills, folks. 2.0 turbo that is in the 4xe doesn't have that many problems, but the whole hybrid part of the powertrain is just a complete train wreck. There was a recall where the powertrains were literally lighting on fire. Not that many actually burned down, but it was definitely a worry. There's just a bunch of electrical issues with the powertrain. The powertrain struggles to communicate with the other part of the powertrain. It's just, there's so much going on with that plug-in hybrid powertrain. If you really want it, get an extended warranty, because you are likely to have to use that extended warranty. And finally, that leaves us with the last powertrain, which is the 6.4 Hemi. This is the bad boy powertrain with the Wrangler. The 6.4 Hemi itself is actually pretty solid, especially if you maintain it properly. There can be some issues. The biggest problem with the 392 is actually not the engine, it's other stuff like the clutch system associated with the 4-wheel drive. But that engine, I would say, is probably the most reliable. The 2.0 turbo is really good and really high up there, but the 6.4 Hemi, the engine itself, pretty rock solid. So I'd say for most people, it's between the 2.0 turbo and the 3.6 V6. I wouldn't even touch the 4xe. And if you can't afford the 392, I'm saying this as someone who owns a 392, it's a really cool powertrain, but understand that you're not paying for extra reliability, you're just paying for extra performance with the 392. I'm trying to hit 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I'd really appreciate it if you'd help out with that. Now, before we get into some dirt, let's talk about big positives with the Wrangler when it comes to reliability. A lot of the accessories Jeep's added over the years, like the winch, function very well even to high mileage, so you don't have to worry about that stuff too much. And a lot of the hardware, like the suspension and the axles, are actually rock solid. Again, the Wrangler is all about durability when it comes to off-road. Jeep is constantly adding items like these heavy-duty rock rails to the Wrangler to make it even more durable. And another good example is the reinforced tire carrier, so that you don't end up destroying your tailgate. So as much crap as the Wrangler gets, it is ultimately still a body-on-frame, durable, solid axle off-road vehicle that can take a lot more abuse compared to 99% of the cars that you see on the road. Now back to the dirt. Paint is something the Wrangler is definitely susceptible to. They have so many color options for the Wrangler. A lot of them are very bright colors. It makes it really hard for Jeep to just be very consistent with their paint. Sometimes you get a good paint job, sometimes not so much. Now this one doesn't have it, but the soft top can still be very problematic with the Wrangler. This one's got a hard top though, obviously. And no, the problem is not the wind noise. The wind noise is annoying with the soft tops. It's just leaking. That can definitely be an issue with the soft top. Obviously, you got to make sure that it's installed properly or you'll for sure have leaks. But even if it's installed properly, there still can be some leaking issues with that soft top. Not the end of the world, because the interior of the Wrangler is kind of meant to get dirty, but it's still not ideal for longevity of the vehicle. The hard top overall is definitely better when it comes to the leaking issue, but again, if it's installed improperly, or if you just get unlucky, it can also have some leaking issues. So something to just be aware of. So I guess give a thanks to Jeep for making an interior that's kind of more basic, that can handle liquids and dirt and all of that kind of stuff. Now, another consistent problem with Wranglers is refueling the vehicle. Sometimes it just constantly clicks that it's already full when it is not. It hasn't even had any gas put into it. There's just a bunch of issues with the fuel sensors. So not only can this make refueling difficult, because sometimes you literally just have to sit there and hold the handle the whole time. You can't just put it on autofill. On top of that, you'll have situations where the vehicle will randomly indicate that it's out of fuel when it's not. This typically happens when you're on large inclines. It seems like Jeep still hasn't kind of figured out that whole system to make sure that there's always able to be fuel sent to the engine, even if you're on a steep incline, which you think they'd have that figured out because this vehicle is literally all about off-roading. But understand there can be circumstances where you're climbing up a steep hill, and if you don't have enough fuel in the tank, like typically if you're a quarter of a tank or less, the engine might just shut off because it's literally starved of fuel, and you have to get the Wrangler back on flat ground for you to be able to start the engine back up. So bring a friend and a winch. Another problem that can happen is just with the steering. It's a solid axle vehicle, so death wobble can always be a thing. But the most common problem you'll see, especially with the 392s, is just the steering system overheating. So you basically just lose power with the power steering. This isn't the end of the world. It just means you got to have bigger biceps. You can actually turn your Jeep while that system is not currently working. I actually had this happen to my first 392, but it's a situation where you basically just have to kind of wait it out and just use a little bit more muscle. It's not a complete failure, it's just a little bit of an annoyance. There is some aftermarket support to fix the issue, from what I understand. But yeah, you can still have steering issues. It's a solid axle vehicle. You're always going to have some sort of funny business with the steering. And while we're on the topic of steering, if you modify your vehicle or if you buy one of these Extreme Recons, make sure that everything is put on properly and tightened down properly. Just a little bit of looseness from one of these bolts here can cause major problems, and it always helps, by the way, to get a steering stabilizer because they don't have it from the factory. But anyways, just make sure everything is tightened down properly, because if it's loose, then yeah, that's obviously going to cause issues. And it can be something that can also just happen from general use with the Wrangler. If you're going over a bunch of rough, bumpy terrain all the time, that obviously has the chance to slightly loosen stuff. And so it's always worth just checking every so often so you don't have a larger failure where something pops off the vehicle while you're driving. Now finally, one of the biggest problems with these modern Wranglers are the electronics. The Wrangler used to be a super basic vehicle. Now it has stuff like keyless entry, power adjustments for these seats. You've got automatic headlights, partially digital gauge cluster here. This big new fancy infotainment system too. It also has Off-Road Plus, which is a fancy electronic traction control system. So I think you guys get the point. The Jeep went from being a super basic body on frame solid axle vehicle to now it is a body on frame solid axle vehicle with a ton of electronics integrated to make it so that it's more daily drivable and just more modern in general. And honestly, what I see is that Jeep is going through the same growing pains that Land Rover was going through about 5 years ago with a lot of their new tech that they put into their cars. So my hope is that Jeep doesn't continue to add tech, that they instead continue to fine-tune the tech they've already added to their vehicles to make it more reliable and just more integrated into the vehicle in general. And this, in my opinion, is super important because even a basic Wrangler still has that same big infotainment system. So it's not like you can get a basic Wrangler without any tech. Every single Wrangler is now going to have some level of technology integrated into it. When everything is functioning properly with the Wrangler, which again was 90%, 99% of my experience with my first Wrangler and why I'm in another Wrangler now, it's such a cool vehicle. It is super unique with the driving experience. It's insanely capable off-road. Like, I've taken literally everything off-road at this point, and there's a lot of cool vehicles out there. Nothing can touch the Wrangler when it comes to off-road capability. Like, you know, a Ford Raptor is gonna be better high-speed off-roading, for example. But when you're just talking about general off-roading, like, there's a mountain, I wanna go up that mountain. Or, hey, I wanna go out in the middle of the desert. This thing just, it can do everything. It's got so much articulation, it's got so much ground clearance. It is truly a crazy vehicle when it comes to capability. And the modern Wrangler, I mean, for what this ultimately is, which is like this crazy articulation rock crawling machine, it drives so well on road. The modern Wrangler is luxurious for what it is. And you know, you've got much thicker glass nowadays, so there's tons of insulation. Like, there is a lot to appreciate about the modern Jeep Wrangler. And so, yeah, as long as Jeep can figure out a lot of these modern electronics, this is going to end up being a really solid vehicle. And speaking of other off-roaders, there's my old Land Cruiser, my old Grenadier. I mean, that's a great example. Like, it took both those off-road extensively, and they can do a lot, but a base model Rubicon with 33s can outwheel both of those. And so you get something like this with 35s, something like that AEV with 37s. Nothing can really compete against it. It's a Wrangler, right? It's a Jeep thing. So that's the Wrangler reliability. Overall, as long as you take good care of it, you know, for the most part, it's going to be a relatively good ownership experience. Again, things are probably going to pop up, right? That was my experience. But I will also say is, I am very meticulous with the maintenancing of my cars, and I think that sometimes people aren't as much with Wranglers. And so my advice, if you're going to buy a Wrangler, if you're just going to drive it on the street, 5,000 miles, oil change, and just have it checked out in general every 5,000 miles. If you do that, you'll be able to keep up with stuff enough that you probably won't have major problems. If you're going to actually be taking your Wrangler off-road, which I know a lot of Jeep people do that, you should probably consider taking your vehicle in every 2,000 to 3,000 miles. I know that seems like such a short maintenance interval, but if you're in four-wheel drive low for 100, 200 miles, and you're really working the powertrain, the driveline, like, you're putting the equivalent of thousands of on-road miles in just a short period of time on the Wranglers, everything. So it's worth getting it checked out. It's worth getting, you know, fresh oil, and just, oh, I didn't realize there's some behind me, and just making sure everything is good. We'll just park this over here instead. So let me know your thoughts on Wrangler reliability, and hopefully that is sound advice for all of you. Let's see the vehicle camera. Boom! Look at that. That's the Wrangler.